I remember asking my mom, and we were more in the mountains, and then some of the city names are in Laos, Lao. So I don't remember how to pronounce some of the names. And so I remember asking her, she goes, "Oh, you were born by the waterfall." And then I had always remember I was born by the waterfall. And I know the country, but where exactly, in the country, I don't know. So when my son Chase asked me, "Where were you born?" I just remember, "Oh, by the waterfall." And that's just what that's what I remember. That's what I told him. And I think I was born, and it gets a little bit confusing. I don't know if we were already, the war may have started and we were already on the move trying to get across the border into Thailand, or if it was just at the beginning. I'm kind of, I've never asked my parents about that. I have no memories of the camp. I have, my earliest memory is when we were in Rock Island, Illinois, and I was telling Chase how, all our neighbors were African American, and I went to preschool. I remember, being in preschool, and I think most of the conversation I had was probably with myself in my head, because I don't think I understood what they were saying, but I was aware of my surroundings. Okay, the process of how my parents got here is my dad has an older brother. He has an older brother, and he came really early with General Wayne Powell. I don't think he was the first one that came, but he came in 1975. And I'm not sure when 1975, because my grandma sent my uncle to school. My dad was a younger brother, so my dad and my aunts, they farmed and raised money to send my uncle to school. And so I'm not sure how my uncle got here, but he got here, he came, and then he got us over here. And it was through a Lutheran church. I'm pretty sure it's through a Lutheran church, because I remember going to church back in Illinois. So we were there I remember vaguely the summertime, and then I remember snow, and then that was it. Yeah, that was it. But I do remember Christmas. We had Christmas, and just like a lot of little stuff, like playing with my neighbors, having no idea, what they're saying, but we're playing. That's why I told Chase, all my friends were African Americans. Those were my friends, other than my own siblings. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure we were in the projects, though. Now that I think about it, I don't think we were in a. I don't know, I don't think we were in a very good part of town. So I remember, I think I went to preschool down the street. I remember playing with fountains, just fountains shooting up, and we're just playing in the water. And then I remember it was in the winter because it was cold, and I don't know what we were. I remember we went to the store. I went to the store with my aunt, and I probably didn't even have a coat on, because I remember we went to the store, and I think it could have been Kmart. I don't know why, but I think I saw a picture. I think it could have been Kmart or something. And then coming back, and my dad running to the car to get me, because I was probably frozen. And then taking me by the stove and turning on the stove top to defrost me. I remember that vaguely. I don't know why, but just like little stories like that, I remember that. I don't know how long we stayed in Illinois, probably not, maybe a year or so. And I remember, I think my mom was working, but she had to work out of town, so we were home with my dad and my grandma. And we were not there long. And then we moved to Long Beach, California. And that I remember more than that for sure. We were not in a good part of town. That I remember. I think I was in preschool, and sitting in the classroom, and just I remember the preschool teacher showing me a picture of some meat, and I'm thinking, she called it meat. I'm thinking in my head, oh, when they say meat, I'm thinking noodle, because that's in our language, that's what we call like ramen noodle. We would, it's like meat, and so I'm like, oh, that's their meat. That's not what I would call meat. I remember just little stories like that. But we were in Illinois, and I rode the bus to preschool, and I remember falling asleep all the time on the bus on the way home, to the point where the bus driver would have to check to make sure I got off the bus. because my mom would be waiting for me, but because she couldn't speak English, she'd just wait and then the bus would leave. And then I remember, I think he was checking the bus the last stop, and I was asleep in the seat, and so he, had to take me back to my stop. And then from then on, I think I just remember he's always checking to make sure I got off the bus, because it happened too many times. I remember my mom just and she wasn't able to say, hey, my daughter didn't get off the bus, or where is she? Did they call the school? She just stayed and waited. And then we were in Long Beach for, I think, only about a year, but we tend to move. My uncle moved to Long Beach, so we went with my uncle, and then there was more, we started gathering more with our relatives. In Long Beach, not so much our relatives, but it was more like my aunt's relative. So we were there for about a year, and then we moved to Clovis, California, where right next to Fresno, so it was a big Hmong population, and we were there for a while, for a few years. So when we moved to Clovis, we were in these apartments built with tons of Hmong people, and it was just, being kids, I don't think it really, for kids, we adapt well, and I don't think it really, I never had any problem with kids around me, their color of their skin, whatever language they spoke. I never had any issue with that, but I think my parents were more comfortable now that we're with people that they can converse with and do things with. Maybe they don't, I've never asked, but maybe they don't feel as lonely. Now that we're with, people that they know that have the same type of culture, that they understand each other. But in Clovis, I remember, I was there. It was fun. I just remember playing outside a lot. We're always outside, and I just remember my parents come home before dark, but we're just within the apartment complex. And schooling, I think I went there for first, second, and third grade, and half of my fourth grade year. I must have liked school, because I remember a lot of my memory is with school, and I love reading. I remember, just like now with my Spanish student, translating for my parents. My dad, he's not that much older, but just translating, for my parents. And I remember in first grade, the teacher, I cannot remember her name, the teacher wanted us to bring a half-gallon milk carton, empty one. So I told my dad, and he brought it to school, but he brought a full one, with the milk still inside. And so just like little stuff like that, when I go back and I think about it, and it's just, it's nice memory. It's nice memory. It's funny memories. I told Chase, I'm close with my dad, and I remember getting something from the price box, like those little hair curlers. So I took it home, and then my dad put it in my hair. He got it stuck. He got it stuck in my hair. We couldn't get it out of my hair, so he had to probably cut off my hair that time, a little part of that. But it's just little, a lot of little stuff like that. I had, school and home life, but my dad had always push education, because he didn't go to school, and he got married very young. He always told us, if you don't do anything, at least graduate high school, because it's different in this country. It's not like back in Laos, where you need a big family and you depend on your husband for everything. In this country, you have to be able to support yourself. So get an education, and I always remember that. Get an education, don't get married young, because at that time you still had, girls that were 13, 14 that were getting married, So I always remember my dad saying that to us, just growing up. Go to school, our homework, most of the time I'm pretty sure we did it on our own, not knowing if it's right or wrong, just kind of working on our own and just turning it in. With the early marriages in our culture, we were always aware of it happening, and it's not that our family embraced that or disagree with that. I think because we're still a very traditional family. My dad is still very traditional. We did go to church when we were in Illinois and in Long Beach because my aunt's side of the family went to church. So we did it, but as soon as we got to Clovis, we stopped going. Now that, my dad found our other relatives who don't go to church, then we just stopped going. But, so he never, we grew up, my dad was very open-minded about some of the things, but it's kind of funny because some of the things that he would say to us is like, oh, if you can still continue going to church if you would like, because my uncle went to church, but my dad was still with the traditional Shamanism religion. So, we have 2 years of church because I told Chase I can probably sing some church song, for you, because, I remember a lot of church songs. But he had always said, in our culture, once the girls get married, you have to follow your husband's belief. So if you would like to go to church, you can continue going to church with your uncle, but if you don't want to, then you don't have to. So it's kind of like, how would you say that? He encouraged us to be independent, but then yet there's a little of our culture still in us where, we know that growing up, once we get married, we leave the family, we have to go live with our in-laws. So it's a little bit of both. So with the young age, I think he would have been more disappointed if we got married young. I don't think he was so against that, but I think he just, in the 2 or 3 years that he was probably in the country, he probably just saw it differently. And I think he wanted us to have an education to just better ourselves and make it where we can support ourselves. I think that's, because he would push the little of our culture in our upbringing, but yet he would say, don't get married young. get an education, but yet he'll tell us, well, it's up to you what religion you want to choose, So it's kind of like, we were kind of brought up to kind of make up our own mind and choose what we want to do. We lived in Clovis for, I think, about 3 or 4 years. And then my relatives, my dad's cousins and brothers, they had chipped in money to open up a little Hmong store, but it's in Visalia. And so I don't know how, but my dad was the one to move to Visalia, and my uncle did too, to run the store, because I think they were commuting back and forth, and it was getting too much. And so then we moved to Visalia, which it's a very small community. Before that, the only other Asian type of people I know were like Laos. And the big one, like the Chinese and the Vietnamese and the Thai. And then I went to school, and then I started going to school with this group of Mien people and Lahu people. And I'm like, oh, I've never heard of that. I've never heard of Mien or Lahu. And that's where I grew up, and that's where I learned about the Mien culture, was because there was a big population of Mien culture in Visalia. But when we moved there, it's funny because my dad put us on the other side of town, not with where all the Asians the Southeast Asian were living. He went to kind of like the other part of the town, and he goes, well, you guys are growing up, and I don't want you to focus too much on playing so more in school, so. He kind of moved us away from where, all the Southeast Asians were. So the school I went to, the Asian population was very small, but the apartments that we live in were, still filled with all, the Mien people, the Laos. It was not a big apartment complex, but it was fun. My cultural identity by then is I understood more, but still a lot of the homework, it's more, I still have to do it on my own. But at that time, my dad was going to school. My dad was going to adult education. He was going to adult school, so he was going to school. My mom she may have been going to school, but we were in school. And by then, I remember I was there for half of my 4th grade year. I went to Mineral King. And then I went there for my 5th grade year, and then my 6th grade year. And he was Mr. Cates. I remember him. He was a great teacher. I had so much fun with him. But I remember in 5th grade, anybody that had Mr. Cates, that that they know they're going to have Mr. Cates the following year were crying because they said, oh, he is so mean. And I remember that, and I was kind of afraid, but he was so fun. He was so fun. I had, the things that he taught us, he was really fun. In school, I was quiet. I don't talk much. I don't ask for help if I didn't understand. I just didn't say much. I just kind of absorb all the information that they were teaching, and I think being an educator now, I try to, when I see my students that don't really talk, do you understand, do you need help? Because I remember just being quiet, not talking. Even if I needed help, I was not going to raise my hand and say anything. I'm just going to sit there. But I didn't cause any trouble. I listened and, I tried my best. But, he was great. He was great. I actually emailed him a couple years ago, but he retired. I emailed him, but he retired already, so the principal said that she will let him know, because there are just those teachers in your life that you just remember, and Mr. Cates was one of them. And I just remember some of the students saying, oh, he is so mean, you're going to have a hard time. And he turned out to be one of the greatest teacher I had. So, and at that time I remember still going to it's not like how we teach avenues now, but I remember getting pulled out. I remember getting pulled out and getting some help. And then I remember when I was in 6th grade, they pulled me out for a small amount of time to help out another 2nd grade Hmong student. And I helped it out for a while. You're into this American culture where you're doing all the things that they do, but yet you still have this, when you go home, you still have this culture that you mix with your Hmong culture. The girls still have to do the cooking and the cleaning, and but then at the same time we still have to do homework and all that. But I was lucky because I have 2 older sisters, so they do most of the cooking and the cleaning. I was more of the babysitter because I had a lot of younger siblings, so I stayed with them and I played with them. But I think it's how my dad raised us, because I never had that identity issue. Maybe I was just really good at switching, when I'm with here, I did this. When I went back home, I did this. I never had any issue within myself with that. Well, maybe just because I came so young, and I just remember mainly, just kind of grew up like that with a, good balance of both. I don't know. I just remember I enjoyed school, so I never had any problem with school. I don't know if I had the best grade in school, but I did like going to school. I was not the first in my family to go to college. I have 2 older sisters, and my oldest sister went to Fresno State. She did go to Fresno State, but she did not graduate from Fresno. She went from Fresno State. She went for 2 years, and then she got married. And she didn't continue her education. But I was the first in my family to get my Bachelor of Science degree. And my dad was really proud, but I got married right at that time too. So I think he was proud, but I think yet sad at the same time. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like, he's, I know he was proud. I know he was proud. And right now, and then there's only, in my family, there's 8 girls and 2 boys. And out of the 10 of us that are here in the United States, only 2 of us got our bachelor. But one of my brother did not graduate high school. So we at least accomplished that goal, if not for my dad, but for ourselves, to better ourselves. So my degree was not in education. I had always been kind of like a little teacher, playing teacher. I loved being a teacher, but when I was at Fresno State, I did, I was working 2 part-time job, going to school full-time, and at that time, my friends like, get into Fresno Unified School District for bilingual aid, because they pay, at that time, $7, you know. It was like, or the minimum wage was $4.25, so like, wow, $7. I go, okay, you know, let me see if I can get in, but I go, I can't read and write Hmong, so I don't know if they're gonna take me. So I applied, and then I went to the school that was down the street from our house. I go, oh, this would be really nice if I could get in. It's down the street, I could work and then go to school. And so I went, and I remember the interview, he interviewed me, and he gave me a piece of paper, and he goes, okay, write a little paragraph in Hmong. I'm like, oh no, I probably won't get the job. So what I did was, I know how to write my first name and my last name in Hmong, and I know how to write Happy New Year because I saw it every New Year. And that's all I wrote. That's all I wrote. I put my name, my first name, I put my last name, and I put Happy New Year. And then I told my friend, oh no, I probably didn't get it because the Hmong part I probably totally failed because I only got my first name and Happy New Year, where I saw every year at the New Year's. I always had a hard time picking up, learning how to read and write our language. I don't know why, because I think in my head I'm trying to learn it like how I learned English, and that's just not gonna work. So yeah, and so, but then the funny thing, they called me and I got the job, and I worked there for about a year. And the teacher I worked with was Mrs. Kernesaw. She taught 2nd and 3rd grade combo, and she goes, you're really good at this. Do you want to do this? And I go, not really. I told her, no, you know, I like doing this, but I don't think I want to be a teacher. I told her that. And so I did that until I finished college and I got married and I came up here. And then I got my Bachelor of Science in Information System Business Administration. I was going for the big bucks. You know, I was like, yeah, you know, education was something I had always liked. And I think I just do it naturally because we play it all the time. It just came naturally, but it wasn't something that I wanted to do. And then I had kids. And then my husband works nights. So I'm thinking, okay, how are we going to do this? If I work an 8 to 5 job, he comes home late at night, how are we ever going to get my kids to school on time? And then that's when I thought, okay, you know what? Let me try. Maybe I should go into, it was always there. I had always liked it, but it was not something that if I had a choice, I probably thought, oh, I want to work in an office, 8 to 5, And so I went and started the process when Jacob was, how old was Jacob? 3, maybe? I started the process. Actually, when I first got, I did take the CBES. So I thought, I'll just take it, If I don't do anything with it, at least I have it. And I took that and I passed, so I had the CBES done. And then when my kids got a little bit older, I thought, okay, what can I do now? Because the field that I was going in was when it was crashing. There was no more job. With information technology, there were, the big companies were laying off people. And so I thought, okay, now I need to look at something else. I go, well, there's always teaching. That's something that I could do. I had always enjoyed that. And so I started the process of looking, being up in Sacramento. I didn't grow up here, so I'm like, what do I do? Do I go to Sac State? What do I do? And then I started, I didn't know there was an Elk Grove Unified District. I always thought there was Sac City Unified. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll try to get into Sac City Unified. And then when I first worked with Elk Grove Unified School District, I came in as an office assistant. So I did the clerical, sub. That's what I came in while I was waiting. And then it was when I was working and, making copies and just kind of looking at what the teachers do. And I go, yeah, maybe. And then one of the teachers go, our district has a TEI program. Do you know what that is? I go, no, what is that? And so I started looking into it, and that's when I went through the TEI program to get my degree, to get my credential. And then I got in 2005, and then I got hired at David Reese, and I've been there since at David Reese for the last 9 years. So yeah, I love it there. I love it there. The diversity of that school is just like how I grew up. Those were the type of school I went to. I remember. And so I put my kids there with me, and I thought, you know what? And I tell them, get used to this, because when you're older, this is your workplace, just like this. You have to learn how to get along with other race. You just have to learn that this is life, this is how it is. And they know, they all went to the school that I went to, and they just know at school it's different. When we're home, it's different. So they're really good with the code switching. But I love it. I love David Reese. I love it there. I love the different culture, the different diversity there. Things that I think are important for teachers to work with when they're working with EL students, language learner, is just because they're quiet doesn't mean they're not listening, and doesn't mean that they don't need help. Some of them are just shy. You just have to really, I think when you go up to them one-on-one, do you understand, do you need help? Then I think they're more open to telling you, where if you're up at the classroom and addressing it to the whole class, do you need, does anybody need help? They're shy. They're not going to raise their hands. They're not going to say, oh, I have no idea what you just talked about, And just to be conscious of those students. And I really try to go to each student regardless, because I teach first grade. So it doesn't matter if they're English only or English learner. They all kind of think the same. They all kind of, process stuff the same. And just because they're EO doesn't mean that they're not shy, because they could be as shy as the English language learner. You just have to really, go to the ones, but then there are the ones that are always asking questions, but then there are the ones who don't, the quiet ones that you tend to not see. And then when you remember, it's like, oh, okay, there's this child. Because I think I was like that. You're right. I was one of those students who was just quiet, good student, didn't say much, but didn't ask for help either, even when I needed help. So we just, as educators, have to remember that sometimes just because they're quiet and they're good doesn't mean that they don't need help, because they do need help. They're probably just not going to ask, especially if they're really shy. And I have four kids, 4 children. I have my 3 oldest boys and then my daughter. And just talking to Chase yesterday, because I was telling him, oh yeah, I have an interview tomorrow at the district office with, because they heard the recording I did with you, Chase. And so he's like, oh, okay. And then I was telling him, I'm part of the secret war. He's like, what secret war? What are you talking about, Mom? And so I was kind of telling him, when I talked about my past and when I talk about the war, it's really called a secret war. They knew we were part of the war. They just didn't know the correct term, that it was, the secret war, part of the Vietnam War. That was all part of it. And I was laughing with him, going, I'm part of that history, Chase. Just like how you guys are with the 9/11. You may have been, not quite one, you were just born that year, but when you have kids, you can say, yeah, I was born when 9/11 happened. And so we just don't talk about it much because we're over here and it's not something you're used to or you see. But yeah, we are part of the secret war. I am, your aunts are, both sets of your grandparents are, and I still have a half sister who's still back in Laos. I think it is important that we do teach about the secret war in Laos, because we hear about the Vietnam War, but I don't think the kids realize that the secret war was part of the Vietnam War. We know about the Vietnam War, but we just don't realize it. Even I didn't make that connection. I just knew, we were part of the secret war, there's the Vietnam War. But as I got older, I go, oh, it's the same war. The secret war was part of the Vietnam War, and we're part of it. It should be taught, because there's a lot of us, and the thing is, there's still people over there that's still in the war. Small group that can't come into the town and can't, they're still fighting that war. So my mom was married very young. She had a daughter. She had my oldest sister, and then she was pregnant with my other older sister. We call them both older because the one here is the older. We grew up with her older, but we actually have one that's older than her in Laos. And when their dad died, they had my dad marry my mom. So it's not like they were boyfriend or girlfriend. It's just something in our culture to keep the kids in the family. You would marry off your sister-in-law to the younger brother. But her dad was the youngest son. So there's nobody younger. You can't marry the older son, but you can marry the any younger sons, even if they have a wife. They want the kids to be in the family, so they go, this is your other wife. That's just our culture, our upbringing. And so my dad was the cousin. My dad was the cousin. So my grandparents saw my mom, and they knew my mom, and they just go, okay, we're gonna marry her for you. My dad was maybe 14, 15. My mom was already with my older sister maybe being 1 and pregnant with my second sister. And they came, and it was right at that time my oldest sister's older brother, her uncle, didn't have any kids, so they thought, okay, we'll take the one that's already born, and because grandma was still alive, and we'll take her, and then we'll bring her back. And then I guess some conflict came up. I don't know what happened, and then the war started. So they got separated. And so they got separated. So we always knew we had a sister. We just never met her. I've never met her. Her real sister, have never met her. It's just we knew that we had a sister in Laos, and then we would just send her stuff. Even now, she has like 8 kids, and if her kids needed, money for school, then there's 10 of us here, so we'll all just kind of chip in and send some back. But she doesn't live in the city. She still lives close to the mountain range, and there's a lot of politics in Laos I don't understand, and I try not to get into, but I know like where she lives, they don't allow you, if you go and visit from this country or any country, I don't think they allow you to stay in the village because they say they can't be liable for your safety. So you kind of have to stay. You can go visit, but you have to go back into the bigger cities. But back in 2006, my mom finally went to see her after how many years? Over 20 years. So she's there. I think one of her son is a teacher back in Laos. And so so we haven't met her. We've been trying to get her to come to the United States, but the government over there, they're refusing because they say there's too many of us here. If she comes, she might not go back. And so we've been in the process of that for a while now. So hopefully, my oldest sister here, who's her real sister, not real, but her full sister, because we're all half, but she plans to go maybe in the next year or so to go see her sister who she hasn't seen. We haven't met her in person. My mom growing up in Laos, the time how she grew up in Laos, it is different. When she grew up in Laos to how we're brought up, it is different. It is different. She didn't have a choice to say, no, I didn't want to marry that boy, really, because my dad was 14, 15. My mom was probably about 2 years older. It's not like she was it's not like she was old, but 14 and you might be 16 and you have to marry this person you don't like. The funny thing is my parents are not divorced, they're still married. And it's one of those marriage that even the relatives, now we're just surprised you guys are still together, coming to this country. My dad didn't really care for my mom at 14. You're thinking of 14, or like my son who's 13 right now. I'm thinking, yeah, trying to get him to marry somebody. It's like, it's not going to happen. I don't want that to happen, but just how different it was back then. How different it is. And I don't know if they're still practicing that there, because, maybe they are, because that's what they grew up with, so it's okay over there. But here we don't hear as often, and we try not to have that practice. But she had no choice. She had no choice. And then for the uncle to come and take her daughter, like it's their right. I know she's hurt by that because she still talk about that. I think she's angry, and she was frustrated, but she blames a lot of her being separated on my uncle and on her grandma, who at that time took her away. If they didn't take her away, then she would have been able to, my mom always said, if you didn't take her away, she would have been able to come here with us, be with us. You took her away, and now she's separated from the rest of her family. And she grew up knowing that she has a family here, but not being able to see, we finally got a chance to talk to her with all the new cell phone technology, 4 or 5 years ago, but all before that was just all letters, all recording like on cassette, sending it back and forth. You still have grandparents that went through the Secret War that really remembered, really, the stories that they tell. They still remember all that. And it's kind of like with what we were talking earlier with the Japanese encampments. We're kind of like the last one. My husband wasn't born here either, but now our kids are, and they're losing the culture. My kids understand, they know about the history, but they can't speak it, so they've now lost it. I can't read and write it, which I'm going to eventually try to do, but now my kids, they don't speak it because they're so used to the English. Even if they understand what I said Hmong, the reply right back is in English. So
is
that's
your husband Hmong?
Yes, okay. We both are, yeah. And, we're different dialect. So it's kind of funny. So, he uses a little, but most of the time I think because we're so used to English, we grew up using a lot of English. But, I do feel sad. I feel sad when I see some of my students, my first grader, I can speak Hmong to, and we have such great conversation. And then I look at my own kids who don't have that. Yeah. They were, and we haven't shared much with our kids some of the stories. Now that Chase and Jacob, they're older, some of the stories, like with all the killing that they saw, with all the kids when they're running through the war, and I don't think I told them this story. Part of the story when we're coming here was they travel in groups and they have to help each other, and there was 3 of us. I was three groups of relatives, and we were babies, and I just cried. I guess I was a crybaby, and I just wouldn't stop crying. And so they gave opium to make the kids not cry, or else everybody's going to get, they're going to find the Thai people or the Laos people, they're going to find us. And so they would give the kids opium to make them stop crying. And, depending on the amount. And so there was 3 of us. One they gave too much to, and I know that baby didn't make it. One, they were okay, but my mom and my grandma refused to give me opium. They were just like, no. And so, there's stories like that I don't share with Chase, saying, if they did, stuff like that. And there was even stories where my groups would separate from us because they say we were, I was crying too much. They didn't want to get caught. And I remember that was one of the stories. And I don't know what happened, but they left. But we got here, and so I asked my mom, so what happened to that family that didn't want to travel with us because I was crying too much? My mom said that they're still back in Laos. I don't know what happened. So, there's stuff like that. If they would have just maybe came and not worry about that. Maybe they would have been here with us. There's just stuff like that. Little stories that, Chase, I don't tell him because it's, he's too young to comprehend all that. Or just, I hear my sisters, they tell a story. My older one who lives here, she actually talked about how when they're running through the war, you see families that, were killed just kind of on the side, and I have to say, I'm fortunate that I don't have any of that memory. I don't have any of that memory of. I don't have any. My earliest memory, like I say, was back in Illinois. All the ones back in Laos. Sometimes I do wish that I have some of those memories, but sometimes when I think about what they saw and what they went through, it's kind of sometimes maybe I don't want that because. And then to grow up with that, so. But there are stories that maybe when they get older, we can share with them. But right now, the stories that we share with them are just kind of like the funny ones. I think, chase them, they just don't make the connection because they're like, oh, you speak English, they just see us being here. They don't see us that we were not born here. We were not born in this country. We were raised here. So we adopted the American culture, and we brought our kids up in this type of culture, but then they don't realize that, even they don't realize the hardship that we went through even growing up not speaking the language. And like I tell my children, I'm able to help you, but then sometimes thinking, it's so hard. Sometimes thinking, we grew up not having any help, and when we did okay, so with all this help, you need to do better. You need to do better. Like I tell my son all the time, when I was in college, we got financial aid, but I never depended on my parents for anything because I just looked at all my younger siblings. There was 6 of them still who were depending on my parents, and so worked 2 part-time jobs, went to school full-time, paid for my own car insurance, paid for, that made me a better person. That made me a better person because as my younger sibling grows up, I can see they didn't have that experience like we did because they just, oh, Mom, I need money for this, money for that. But us growing up, we never, unless we needed money, I would never ask my parents for money because I can just see, they don't even make enough. How can I be over here saying, hey, I need some money here too? So the older siblings, we tend to be more independent because I think we were brought up that way, and we see the hardship our parents went through, and the younger ones, they got too used to the culture, so they're really just, those are my parents, so they're supposed to support me. My dad does speak English. My dad, he got his high school diploma when we were living in Visalia, and I don't know what year that was, but I remember we went to his, ceremony. But my dad, yeah, he does speak English because my dad's just turned, I think, 62. So my parents are still fairly quite young. My in-laws, they're in their 80s, so they're older. They don't speak, they can understand and speak a little, but my dad's pretty fluent. And then my mom is, they don't need any translator now. I will see my parents for Christmas. We always go down for the holiday. We try to see them as much as we can. Not as much now. My parents used to own like a little strawberry stand when my kids were younger, and we would go all summer because the kids just love playing with the dirt and not getting in trouble. But they no longer have that. They're just working, and so we just go when we can, when my dad have time off. But my parents are both they're doing fairly well. They plan to next year take another trip back to Laos, but not so much to visit the relatives, but maybe to tour Laos and Thailand. Like with the tour group, because I know like my dad said when he went, it's hard because you have so many relatives left still over there that are still so needy that, and then with our sister still there too, it's hard. With the sons being on pedestal, like we always, with the son being on pedestal with, us having like 2 brothers, but yet one of the other brother didn't graduate high school. So I know that's hard on my dad, and then all the girls did, and it's just, but he loves us. But it's so hard. It's so hard for that generation to kind of let go that it's not always about the boys. It's not always about the boys. Me having 3 boys and only 1 girl, I'm the one over here who's really sad because I grew up with so many sisters, and then I'm like, what? I only have sons? I need a girl in there somewhere. But we always talk about at David Reese how, I go, it's funny because we have Hmong women have no identity. Once you get married, you're gone. You're done. You now belong to your family's family. And I didn't even realize this, just like some little stuff of our culture that's really neat. But I can't, if I was to go back and live with my parents, and I can't pass away in their house. You can't do that. Because, if I was to go back, if I was older, and I can't, once you're married off, you can't go back, and if you were to get sick or anything, they won't let you pass away in their house. You would have to be somewhere else. It's just all these, like, if you have a baby and you're not, I can't go visit my parents because I can't go into their house. All these, like, little culture that you'd be surprised that we still keep. We still have. You can only go certain places. You can only do certain things. And we were talking about, I don't know, we were in the staff lounge talking about the different name with the different culture. And I go, we have no identity. Once we get married, they call us by our husband's name. I go, if you really listen, because I have some nieces and nephew that comes to school, when they see me, sometimes they call me Miss Yang because I'm at school, but you hear them calling me Auntie K. K is not my name, that's my husband's name. They don't call me Auntie Pang, they call me Auntie K. And, we try not to do that, but we still have that practice. Even I have to say I still have that practice, because when they call their aunts, they don't call them by their names. They call them by their uncle's name. So it's like Auntie Blanc, Auntie Jai. Those are all the husband's names. Those are not the wife's names. And we talked about that, how we should have a Christmas game, and we have to tell the kids to see if they know the mom's first name, because they don't know our first name. They all call us by our husband's name. So, yeah, we were joking about how, let's play that. Let's see if they really know which name belongs to which auntie. Being married at a young age, I don't know where, I don't, because I got married when I was 22. That's like a spinach stir in our culture. I was way past my time to be married that late, the latest they might say, 18, but I'm all like, but I don't want to get married yet. So, and even at 22, it's still fairly young, but in our culture is, nobody's going to marry you now, so yeah, so there's a big difference. But you also see, there are some who marry at 14 who are still married, and then you have some who are, both my sister-in-law, my husband's sisters, who marry at 13 and 14, who are around my age, who have kids that are as old as my youngest sister. They're all divorced. Because, they got married at 14, 15. I don't know if they were.
And they came here.
They were married here. They came here, yeah. Yeah, yes. And so, but then yet you see some, like, they're still married. And then I have a young sister-in-law. She was married at 15. They're still married. So, I just don't know. I don't study that. I don't know how that works. All I know is I tell my kids, you have to be able to support yourself, if anything. Don't. 13, 14 is not going to cut it for me. But then that's just also, I was brought up not to even before now, like with my dad, not to get married so young. So that's something that you would have to ask them. They would have to be able to ask. But yeah, you kind of sometimes have to don't judge that. I step away from that because it's part of our culture that it is okay. But then yet, where we're at today, it's not okay. So there's that fine line, and unless it's one of my child, I don't say anything. If it's not my kids, I just say no. It's it's up to the parents. I don't touch that. I'm just and then I don't have really any experience with that too, because in my own family, none of us got married that young. The youngest was 18. Yeah. And then I used to be the oldest, but now I have sisters who are in their late 20s, and I don't think they're planning to get married. So, so that's it's like you're going from, it's like a culture shock from 14 to I don't think I want to get married. So, yeah, and those are the younger ones that grew up, that were born here. It's just one of those things where, like, my sister-in-law said, you should go back to Laos and teach in Laos, and I'm all like, I wouldn't feel safe. I would love to go back and teach, but I wouldn't feel safe in that country because with the government being how it is, and if they see me coming as helping not just the Laos people, but just the helping out the Hmong people who they don't want to have any, no sort of education. I just can't. I'm all that scary. I just can't. Maybe when I'm older, I don't know. I just can't. I would love to go back and at least see my sister, or I would love to. She goes, you would be, good over there, but I don't know. That's just something. Oops, that's just something I don't think not until I'm older that I can do, but to teach in a different country is something I might think about one day.